In a world with entirely too many shows about cars, this is another pointless automotive podcast.
Welcome back to the, what are we calling ourselves nowadays? Another pointless automotive podcast?
Yet one more, another one, another pointless automotive podcast.
Yeah.
How are you, Chad?
Doing good, Frank. How you doing, man?
Oh, I'm good. You know why I'm good?
Why are you good?
Not only
Tell
because
me.
I'm in your presence, but there's a McLaren Senna behind us yet again. We're hanging out at a car park once more.
It's gorgeous. Yeah, it is a wonderful place. There's too much to look at. My eyes are always wandering.
Yeah, it's troublesome because it's like I'll look around and be like, oh, there's like whatever 50-something really nice cars here. I only have like 5 or 6 superfluous cars at home.
Yeah,
I'm not
nothing
doing
really
that
nice.
bad. I'm actually okay.
I'm catching up.
I don't have a problem. You have a problem. So it's not exactly good for my mental health in that regard, but it is good to be here. And another
Super
hat
awesome.
tip to the folks at Car Park here in Pleasanton for housing us and putting up with our nonsense again and letting us record some podcasts.
And report all the illegal activity we see.
It is, yes.
I think that's
might
you
be an
Freudian
informant.
slipped it. Yeah.
What
Might have tipped your hat too
what
far.
are we doing today? What do we got going on?
It struck my mind the other day that we do a lot of wrenching.
Sure.
Shade tree mechanics, if you will.
The lowest brow.
Oh, God, yes.
Mhm.
Not at all certified.
No.
Not at all insured. But so I was thinking we do so many wrenching projects. Think of our PCP we report every week.
Sure.
But we've never really tackled just wrenching jobs. We've never had an episode where we just talk about, the jobs
Different kind of jobs.
Yeah, the jobs we enjoy
And
doing,
perhaps.
like our happy face jobs, and then there's the jobs that we don't like to do that we need to do.
Sad trombone jobs.
Was that a sad trombone?
Yeah, not a rusty trombone job. That's a
Okay.
different deal. But a sad trombone job. Yeah, so
We may be able to
some
hook you up
fun,
with that.
some are good, some are less good, some are maddening.
They can be, yeah.
Where do you want to start? Where should we?
Let's start positive and then we'll go dark.
Ooh,
How about that?
we can do that. We can
want-
go. We can start with the light meat and go towards the dark meat.
I'll allow it. Okay,
Okay.
what do you?
Okay, that's a turkey reference.
Yeah, was it? Why don't you start us off with a job that you actually enjoy doing, Frank? Like a job that, like, when it comes up and it's time to do it, something you actually don't mind kicking back and doing.
Okay. Let's see. Outside of hand, there is. Boy, what is actually good? You know what? One thing I like, but it can go both ways. But there's nothing
Just
quite
like you.
true. There's nothing quite like getting into a diagnosis situation where you've got like, why is this happening?
Yes.
And you kind of go through the things, you eliminate this and you eliminate that. And by golly, you get it right. There's nothing quite like having some, a no start condition or a why is this now suddenly running rough? And you go back to basics and you go through things and then you figure it out. And it works. And sometimes maybe it's easy. Maybe it's, this little vacuum line is broken, but it's only broken when you're at more than half throttle because the motor mounts are bad.
boy,
And so the
yeah.
bad motor mounts disconnects the hose and then it starts running like garbage. There's all kinds of little stuff like that where it's not like this huge headache of a part, but it causes some kind of major issue. And when you do the diagnosis and you get it right,
Oh, yeah.
you
solve the problem.
without like getting overly frustrated, okay, well, it wasn't that. Let me check. But well, it could be this. No, it's not that. What about this? Bingo.
Yep.
And you solve it.
What a feeling.
It's great.
It feels like you just cured cancer, right? Like you're like,
Sure.
I stopped this temporary.
which I have done. So I know exactly what
True.
it's like to feel like to cure cancer. Also good. Maybe not as good as this.
But an intermittent no start condition, definitely tricky. What a good feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything
do you
intermittent.
do you have any heroic diagnosis stories while we're thinking about it? Or we
Diagnose? Well, I'm doing one right now with that Mustang GT.
Sure. Yeah, I
mean,
know that was last week's PCP.
Yeah, just going through. I agree with you. When you're going through someone else's problem or something that someone else has possibly messed up, I think that's a really good feeling to unpack it. Like both calming for my mind to work my way through that problem and to actually give someone back their car or my own car. Either way, super rewarding to fix that thing. I totally agree with you. Diagnosing stuff, which can be very challenging, though. I think I think most rookie mechanics get hooked up on diagnostics. They fall into I'm going to throw parts at this problem until it goes away, or I'm just going to scratch my head and, Google it away until stumble upon something.
It can be, sometimes you can get, I'll catch myself wanting to just be like, well, I'll throw this part at it. That's probably it. And then and then nothing happens. And then you're like, damn it. I knew better.
True.
There's a lot of ways to do it. I remember I was helping somebody work on it was a 98 Mercedes CL500. So that's the W140, or it was a coupe. So it was a C140 chassis.
That's right.
The M113 V8, and it had basically a no start condition. So you would crank it, and it would crank, fire up, and the moment you let off the key, back to the run position, it would shut down every time. It would almost like a fuel, almost like a fuel pump. It was way underpowered. It was just getting just enough fuel there to kick it over, and then once there was some demand, it would fall out.
Huh.
So nothing. It's a 98 OBD2, so I plug a scanner in it. It's got no fault codes at all. Nothing. So boy. So try it. Nothing. I try the test the fuel pressure at the regulator at the fuel reel. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't seem like it's a fuel pressure problem. What else could it be? Apparently a common issue on those is the crank position sensor, which is on the top of the bell housing behind the motor, right at the firewall.
Sure.
Part was cheap. I threw a part at it, right? I bought the cheap part. It was like $18 for the position. No change. Okay. I started digging through it. I noticed that the stereo doesn't power up. The stereo doesn't power up, and the HVAC doesn't power up.
Okay.
So that center console area cluster is all. I think, okay, that's weird, but it's an older S-Class, not unheard of, right? And then I think, you know what? The way it's acting, almost like maybe it's a security issue, right? Let me try the other key. There's another key in a fob. Try that key. Same thing. So I go, okay, something's going on here. I check electrical connections up under the dash to see if there's something loose or something. Maybe it is a security system issue, because that's what it feels like. But it's not. I can't. It's not. It doesn't change with the key, so it's got to be on the car side, not the key side, right? Maybe the sensor at the actual ignition is bad. Yep. I get through that, and I eventually talked to the gentleman, the owner of the car, and I say, hey, did you do anything? Because it was parked with this condition for a little while. I said, was there anything going on before this? Did you change something out? Did you swap a battery out? He's, well, it was running okay. I parked it for a little bit, and then it got dirty. So I washed it. I said, before I'm going to drive, I'm going to wash it. So he washed the whole car completely down, including cleaning out. There were a bunch of leaves up in the cowl.
Okay.
And so there's the cowl grill right there. So he popped the cowl grill out. He cleaned all the... Did I say cowl grill? I did not mean to say that. The cowl grill. The reverse cowl grill. And he pulled the leaves and stuff out of there, put it all back together. He washed the whole car down. No start condition. He assumed it was probably from sitting before, maybe bad gas or something, because it sat for 6 months. Put it all back together, and that's where we were. So I said, okay, there's obviously a correlation here. So I dig around, I pull all the cowl grill off and everything, and I see on that car, right behind the cowl grill on the passenger side, is where it brings in air for the HVAC system. Mm-hmm. And sitting right there is also the blower motor.
Right.
So I pull the connector for the blower motor that's right there, and one of the wires for that blower motor, it just at the connector, it's burnt and black, like it's shorted at the connector.
Okay.
So I disconnect that connector, go in the car, fires right up.
Yep.
Instantly. Didn't even a third of a crank.
That was your short,
man.
And
so what happens is, apparently on those cars, the security system is routed through the same electrical system as the HVAC system. So with that HVAC system shorted and down, with that short through the HVAC system, it was also causing a fault with the security system, and it was
Mobilizing
it
the
was
ignition.
immobilizing.
Yep.
So I
Gotta
disconnect that, we get it, fire right up. Car drove perfectly. Just drove like a dream.
Yep.
Put it all
Gotta
back
love that
together.
stuff.
I'm just like, if I had not asked that guy that question,
Sure.
the likelihood of me tracking that down,
Oh boy.
I mean, 30 hours into it, maybe not even.
Yeah,
like,
you could be-
that's not something I would have looked at for a nose star. Well, maybe there's a shorted out connector at the blower motor under the cowgirl on the outside of the
It
car.
really sounds like you're saying cowgirl. I love it.
It is. It's a Freudian.
You're like late
Freudian slip.
You're like late night Googling wiring diagrams on old Mercedes. Like,
Yeah,
what's the
it's just
circuit?
bonkers. And so, damn, it did feel good to get that right though.
That is
I
a
was
good
probably
one.
in it like 6 hours of
Oh
just
yeah.
like,
Dicking around.
what is going on with this? Yeah, checking all the stuff, putting this part in it, checking fuel pressure, making sure I've got spark. I mean, I had spark because it was, at least initially, I was like, is it just cutting spark? And that's what it was doing with the
There's a lot of those like
The
little
mobilizer.
thing causing a big problem is another thing. You don't think it's going to do that, and when it does, and it's an unfortunate incident, but you did get that good hint. For me, it's doing stuff that I don't like to take things for granted. A lot of people take, oh, it's
Sure.
old. This thing leaks a little oil. It's okay.
Mhm.
Nothing should leak any fluid, in my
Right.
opinion. A well-sorted car, leaks can be. It is a lot of work though. But for one of my fun jobs is stopping an annoying leak. So when you do that,
Okay.
replace those gaskets, whether it be a valve cover gasket, a cam seal,
Mhm.
whatever. If you're even doing like a front crank seal or something,
Okay,
just
yep.
getting that replaced and having that car that has been dripping everywhere you've been, which
For
is
like
kind of an
years.
embarrassment, right?
Yep.
There's nothing more rewarding to that than getting under your engine bay like 2 weeks later, shining a flashlight, and everything's bone dry. For me, that's like one of the most rewarding things because I think so many folks are
Mhm.
okay with their cars leaking fluid, which blows my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know it, you know.
Oh, sure.
Oh, they all leak, man.
Yeah,
I'm like, well,
exactly. Well, it's
well.
yeah. Well, that's the thing too. Is like kind of part and parcel to that. It's the same. We're like, and to touch back on the diagnosis thing again, it's just like when somebody's like, well, oh, it's not starting or it's running rough, and yeah, I know it has this issue, this issue, this issue, and this issue.
Sure.
But now it's doing this.
Go figure.
And this new thing is the one thing that I want to take care of. I don't care about the other stuff. I've lived with that for a long time. But the new issue is just like, well, you think this other thing, this new thing could be part and parcel and related to all this other stuff? Yeah, probably.
You mean like how I want you to do my brakes, but my tires are bald? Just
Right.
do the brakes, please. Don't. I know you can see the inner lining of the tire. I don't care. I just need
Yeah.
brakes.
Or it's like, yeah, like, it's got this intake tube and it's kind of like cracked and dry. So I patched it and stuff.
Oh, boy.
And I've wrapped it up with tape and stuff, and it's holding fine. And it's been like that for years, but now it's running really rough. And I don't know. It's just like, start with the known issue, dog. Like,
yeah. Well,
take care of that.
That's how it works. Maintenance, right?
And
It's
a lot
the
of
name of the game.
Yeah, or just like half-ass repairs that then get you in trouble later, and then being mystified why like other things are falling apart.
You know what I put on my list that's kind of funny?
Ooh, what?
And this is something I, for some reason, do more than anyone else on this planet
Mushrooms.
while I'm doing the job too.
Oh, yeah. Whatever powers you through.
Timing belt jobs,
Yeah,
my friend.
buddy.
Because so here's the thing: a lot of people,
built
yeah,
specialist.
a lot of people are intimidated by timing belt jobs, rightfully so.
Sure, you screw up, it can be
It's
game
like
over,
you're
man.
one
Game
turn,
over.
you're one key turn away from replacing a head. There's a head joke in there somewhere. But for me,
Speaking of jobs,
I like timing belt jobs because you really have to be methodical. You have to take your time. For me, this is how I do it right. Make sure everything's organized because you take a lot apart usually to access just the timing belt.
Sure,
But
yeah.
it has to be perfect. It literally has to be perfect when you do a timing belt. Like I'll count the teeth between the cams if it's a dual overhead cam design.
turn it over by hand like 6 times
Yep.
just to make sure.
More
Yep.
than that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I will crank the engine by hand 1,000,000 times, even though if it was off, you'd still F up the engine. But anyway.
Right, exactly. Well, yeah,
Uh,
this huge breaker bar. You're like, boy, I hit a hard spot.
You hear my
Hulk-
valve snapping?
Hulk your way through your valves.
But for some reason, man, it's just they're always so daunting. But once I start it, and especially when I'm at that point where I get the new belt on there and I'm standing back looking at the clean front of the engine,
Sure,
I've
yep.
done all the seals, which was a perfect piggyback off my previous quote or point. It's just something about doing timing belts. They're just so involved, and then there's so much anxiety that first startup.
Do you ever watch or check out on Reddit, there is like there's a subreddit.
Oh boy.
There's lots of ones you probably shouldn't. I'm sure there's like furry ones. There's all kinds of weird stuff.
Oh, there is.
Yeah. Oh, let me tell you. How much time do you have? No, but there's one. I believe it's just rolled into the shop, where it's all like pictures of weird stuff from like people run into at the shop, at a mechanic shop.
They have a YouTube channel now, which is amazing.
Oh, they
just
do?
rolled in, yeah.
Oh,
and it's fantastic.
Snap.
So kind of low key.
There you go. We'll have to check that out. They're getting
out.
their shout out to our 11 listeners, but they have. I saw one on there where a guy took in I think it was a Subaru, like an Outback or something like that, and the guy was there for he was there for his timing belt service, and somehow the timing belt went like the full 90,000 miles or 105,000 miles with the whoever did it last never pulled the grenade pin on the tensioner. And it somehow held the entire service life.
Maybe they didn't tighten it down all the way when they. Well, you have.
I don't
to
know.
get
And the guy was
pin in
saying
the
like,
hole.
look, he was like showing there was like way too much play in it, but it somehow must have just run barely just enough.
Maybe it has
to limp through for 100,000 miles.
Maybe it has high tolerances for being off. Who knows?
It must, but I mean, it was a more modern car, so you'd think it would throw like, camshaft position sensor faults or something
Wild
like
is
that.
that? Because you have to have it all
it's
the way
like, dude,
compressed
look
to
at
line
it.
up the hole to pull the pin in.
Yeah, I mean, it's all like it's hanging on by a prayer.
See, that's the stuff that scares me. Like, did I forget to pull the pin when you start it the first
Really?
time?
It's been running fine. Oh well.
And
Ship
most time
Where do you leave that pin? Uh-oh.
Yeah, but
Just
it's like
kicking
3
around
hours
in the timing
of
cover.
labor to get back to that pin, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times you're pulling the whole radiator, everything in the front of the engine
Yeah, if
comes
it's an
off.
Audi, like the whole front clip comes off the car. Yeah.
Or like transverse front wheel drive cars where it's up 2 inches away and you had to pull the engine mount and all kinds of stuff to access it.
Support the engine.
Hate that feeling.
Yeah.
Dude, when you doubt yourself, you get done with a timing belt job and you go back and you're like, oh my God, did I tighten down the tensioner bolts all the way?
Yeah, you
like,
realize
the tensioner
like
just falls off. Same
Yeah.
story.
yeah, not good.
Dude, that's amazing. That also scary. Also completely a scary story.
It is scary. So he showed the guy like, yeah, where'd you have this done last, my guy? Because you probably don't want to bring it back there.
That's a big step to skip. That's a good one though. But yeah, timing belts, man. It's just I hate doing them because the stress. But for some reason, they're super rewarding when I start that car.
Right.
Like,
satisfaction.
Yeah. Oh. How about you, man? Any other super rewarding or fun jobs you've done?
Oh boy.
Specific or general?
I'm trying to think. There's a lot of stuff that is some maintenance stuff. Oil changes. But like doing brakes on a car that desperately need brakes. And you're just and you're not pad slapping it. You're doing rotors, you're doing pads and
Fluid.
It's nice stuff and you're bleeding stuff and whatever and it's just like it's not exactly challenging, but like especially if it's like the weather's nice and you got a bubbly beverage and you're listening to music with your eye
it's a big impact.
on your Microsoft Zune.
Yeah, it's a big impact job though. I mean, upgrading your doing your
and
brakes
you're good for a while. If you're if you're doing it for like for somebody, you're just like, hey, you're in good hands now. Like, you're good. It's just it's good. It's generally low pressure. Not always. Like you run into like a cranky caliper that the piston doesn't want to slide back in,
or a Honda rotor that's got a rusted, stripped out screw holding it in place.
Yeah, those screws that kind of are pointless anyways, but they're there.
I never put them back.
Or like the cranky parking brake. Drum that doesn't want to release or it's hanging up. It's like super grooved and it won't back out anymore. And you're sitting there like, do I get a slide hammer and risk like chewing this parking brake or whatever you're going to do? Some of that stuff is annoying. But like when it's supposed to be a smooth brake job and it is smooth and the birds are chirping and the sun is shining and it's 73 degrees out.
And you go to bead the brakes in and it stops so well.
And you don't bust a single knuckle.
Yeah,
everything's great and nothing's squeaking and the caliper pins are sliding just fine and
I grease them up. I love doing that.
Sure,
I love greasing up the caliper pins.
And
doing brake jobs.
Yeah, I'm telling you, they're that is not an unfun job. That is that's just a good day. Yeah,
the nice smooth when everything goes according to plan.
Stopping is good. That's a good thing to do.
Yeah, that too. Not running over small flora and fauna and other things. Pedestrians.
You know what else I put on my list?
Ooh, what?
Spark plugs and wires. For a couple reasons.
Sure.
Because for me, it's like the first time you see an internal engine thing when you're working on your car. Yeah, your
Okay.
oil condition, maybe your air filter. But when you pull those plugs out, you get a huge hint to how your engine's running and how your car's overall health is, right?
Yes.
So I think, and it's not, okay, so here's the point, right? So on some vehicles, it's way more approachable than others, right?
Absolutely.
Let's be honest, like a four-cylinder regular engine takes me 5 minutes to 15
Yep.
minutes to do all the spark plugs.
Yep.
Whereas you get on a
Your
Subaru,
98 Camry.
yeah, if you get on a Subaru Boxer engine, you're going to be doing some cursing.
Or how about my Sienna? I think the book time was like 4.8 hours or something just for plugs.
Which is brutal, absolutely brutal. But
Yeah.
it's I think it's so important because that overall health of your engine. It's the only time you get to really see that, right? Like your
Yes.
your plugs are going to hint at: are we running rich, lean? Are we any other conditions? Are we fouling it with fuel?
That's part like that's such a simple, like classic old school, like diagnostic situation, reading plugs, and it's so frustrating when you're working on a car, and because of the layout and the way stuff is put together, you kind of can't do that.
Right.
We're like, okay, well let me pull the plugs and I'll clean them, I'll pop them back in, I'll run it for a minute, and then I'll reread them and see what. Okay, like on my Sienna to do that, it's like you pull the intake off, you pull the cowl, you pull the wipers, you pull the wiper motor,
Sure.
like on and on and on and on, all the stuff to get to it, to be like, okay, oh, here's this plug, oh, that looks good, let me put it back in and put it all back together, and then you might go, oh, it turns out it's, and then be like, okay, well let me just move, coil number 5 to cylinder from 5 to 3
Oh, if
and
you're
see if my
chasing misfire?
my
Sure.
misfire moves.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a 10-hour operation.
I
Just
always
absolute
swap
madness.
the price of plugs. I always swap plugs when I'm going in there, even on
Sure.
the four cylinders. that
Yeah,
take
if you get there,
15
you're doing
minutes.
it. Yeah, you're
Especially
you're
like
there.
any boxer engine, like my Porsche, same thing. If I'm going in there pulling the plugs, they're coming out.
Yeah. Yep.
Regardless. But there's something about it, and then I don't think it gets done enough. It's like an easy thing to do on most cars.
Sure.
And it's very affordable too. Like spark plugs still are like, if you're not running like platinums or iridiums, they're still like $1 and change per plug, $2 a plug. And it really doesn't take that much time. You need minimal tools. There's really not too many ways you can mess it up, although I have seen it done. Go ahead and ask me how I know this. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I was working on I think it was like a 2003-ish Volvo S60,
Okay.
the 2.4 liter inline 5.
Yeah.
And it had a significant misfire. So all right, it was like misfire cylinder number 1. All right, pull the plug. This car had like 220,000 miles on it. Had the original spark plugs in it.
Wow.
The original, and they look like hell.
I'm sure the
Had the original plugs in it, and like Volvo. I'm like, what?
I'm sure the tip was like worn down to like.
Oh yeah, it was
teeniest
just
nubbin.
and they were just dirty, and they were fouled, and they were terrible. I'm like, okay, let me go buy new plugs. Put 5 plugs in it, put it all back together. Thing purred.
See?
It was so happy.
But spark
I'm like,
plugs are-
bro, you got 200 and something thousand mile spark plugs in here. What are you doing?
They're
Like,
one of those big impact,
"Your
small
engine light's
price.
blinking, and it's barely running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez. But yeah, I was looking at a friend's Miata, and I was pulling the plug. He's like, this one plug is not coming out. And I'm like, let me see. And it took a lot of force to come out. And lo and behold, it came out with a helicoil attached to the plug. And I'm like,
no.
this is... So I say spark plug, changing plugs is an easy job. But you guys got to be careful. If you overdo it and
Gorilla
strip
torque,
out,
yeah.
oh my God.
Aluminum head.
Yeah, just the head of your engine. Don't worry about
Looking
it.
at you, 5.4 Triton.
I think it did it by itself, though. You
Yeah,
didn't
it
even have
fires
to-
them clean through your hood.
Nightmare. But the funny thing is the helicoil came out with the plug. I'm like, yeah, I guess it could have gone worse.
I suppose, but what you do, you just like you put a helicoil back in.
Yeah, really. One step size larger.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, you
gotta,
have to.
You got to retap it, right?
Yep. Did that whole job. That was tricky.
Well, yeah, because you don't want to just be dropping
Well, you don't want.
shavings into the head.
Yeah, so you have to vacuum it out as best you can. Use a magnetic tool to get down in there.
Pray. Yeah.
But the thing is, like, if I hadn't caught that, I mean, what do you do? Just keep the spark plug in there for the till the end of time? It definitely need to be changed.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's stuff like that. Like, basic jobs can turn into nightmare jobs. Like, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
How many times have you seen people, like, these funny videos online where someone puts the brake pads backwards and it has, like, the metal surface on the rotor when they're
Yep.
driving? Or
Yep.
there's a million other things. I'm sure you can mess up. Oil changes get messed up a lot.
Yeah, or even back to brakes real quick. Just putting Like, yeah, put a caliper on. You put the caliper on upside down, or like the right side on the left and the left side on the right, and you're like, I can't get any pedal feel. It's always super squishy because the bleeder's on the bottom.
Yeah,
and
your
on
bleeder's
top, and
pointing
it's like,
down.
oh god, what do we do?
Bleeding these brakes is super fast.
This is bizarre. I've bled it like 11 times. I don't understand.
No air's coming out. Must be good.
Yeah, rip it, rip it.
Yeah, it's very true. But
I'm trying to think of like a time where I
messed up a basic job. Oh, we should tell stories about that.
oh boy.
Where did you botch something like a basic?
That's
I
what
got a
I'm-
good one.
That's what I'm thinking. You go, and I'm gonna think of one
Okay.
while you maybe what you're gonna tell me will like spark something.
It was late at night. I had worked a long day. Me and my good friend were going to Laguna Seca for a
Not
track
just
day.
like this. I feel like you've told this story on the podcast before.
The
Did
double
we do our
O-ring?
early?
I might have.
Yeah, I think you did.
Okay, well, but it is something, it is a basic job. So,
Mm-hmm.
We've all done this. It was on my Legacy Spec B. I didn't check. It was so late at night, and I was so tired that
Yep.
the old O-ring from the oil filter stayed on, and I double O-ringed it by putting a new one on.
just pissing
Backed
oil.
off and royal purpled my driveway.
Oh boy.
It's an expensive coating, by the way.
It is. It
but
is.
We
Especially
still,
if you value your driveway.
Now I check 5 times
Uh-huh.
if the rubber O-ring came off. But there's plenty of times where I've done that. Little things like that, but caught myself. I think I went
Yeah.
to put when I put my Magnum. This is what I didn't tell. When I went to put the Magnum back on the head, I had
Okay.
forgotten.
Careful how you word that, my friend.
Yeah, I was about to give the head.
Just the Magnum.
Oh,
When I was
it's-
putting my Trojan Magnum on my head.
Always Magnums.
Yep.
He wears the Magnums. So I go to put the head back on.
Yes.
I had forgotten to put the lifters in.
Oh boy.
So I'm about to bolt them down, and these are one-time use head bolts, right? So
Yeah, they're torque to yield, right?
Yep. So I'm about to tighten. I'm like, oh my god,
You look over and there's a pile of lifters
sitting in the oil that they're supposed to pre-soak in, and I'm like,
Yeah.
this is what happens when you work long days and spend the night in your garage.
Yes.
So that was almost a critical mistake because those are not cheap, those bolts, and waiting for new ones to come. And God forbid, I wouldn't have started. I would have found them eventually, but geez, that almost cost me a little bit of time and money.
Yeah, I mean, there's one where I just, and I think I've talked about it briefly on this here podcast, but on the 280ZX Turbo that I owned briefly, where I bought it from a guy who said it had a blown turbo and it was pumping smoke out the tailpipe, so I just took that at face value. Turns out the head gasket was wasted or the head was warped. I never even found out. I never got that.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, yep, hey, oil looks good. Let me put this, and I put a turbo in it. The turbo needed to be rebuilt, so whatever. Fish it out, send it out, put it all back together, and oops, turns out that oil instantly shaked itself because the guy had put fresh oil in it.
Of course, to sell it, right?
Yep. I mean, I paid $500 for the car, and it was worth more than that anyway, so I wasn't like, it's not like I got completely boned.
Is it
but
a
was
well
just-
bought question mark?
that was
bought?
well bought. The buying the new turbo oil line and rebuilding this turbo to immediately
Unfortunate,
pump
yeah.
milkshaked oil into all of it instantly
That sucks.
is not, that part of it was not well bought. And
Yeah,
so,
that
just
sucks.
being like, hey, I was told it needs this, and so here I go, and then just not like doing some more base level stuff, like maybe, oh, hey, you know what, maybe if I pulled whatever, say pulled a valve cover or something like that, I probably would have figured it out. Or if I
Yeah.
pulled if I did a compression test, I would have, anyway.
Or run it a little bit and seen that milkshake show up.
Yeah, as if, it was there to bring all the boys to the yard. But
Brought all the rebuilt turbos to the yard.
it did. So that was not a good day on my end.
All right. Well, we're taking a turn here. Let's
worse?
Let's go into the. Yeah, we are. How
Oh,
about
boy.
not fun jobs? Jobs.
Everything else.
Yeah.
No.
Things you've had to do that you specifically or in general that you hate to do when it comes up. Like
You
you,
know
just
what?
loathe it. Where
You
you
know what?
almost consider, Frank. You almost consider
Throwing a wrench into the drywall. across-
bringing it to a shop.
Do you know what the one is?
a little harder
You know
for
what
me
the
to
one
do.
is when you've got it all figured out and you replace the part. Let's say it's a starter.
Okay.
I'm gonna say it's a starter. It's not
Sure.
a terrible job. Some cars are
Some.
terrible,
Some
but it's an annoying job. Couple hours in, you swap a starter out. Can't put it off in. And nothing. You turn it. What the fuck? Check the battery. You've got what, 14.3 volts or something. Okay, well that's good. We're good there.
Very good.
Everything. You check your connections. You double check. You go through. You make sure your grounds are good. You take the wire off the starter side.
Yep.
You make sure all the connections are clean. Nothing.
Not
You didn't get a
touching paint,
oily thin
grease.
finger mark or something. It's all fine. You put it all back together. You torque it down. Click, 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 click. The brand spanking new part you bought is bad.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Which happens. I've
happens.
literally had that happen with a starter where I got like 2 good starts out of it and then dead.
Sure.
And you're like, what the? And there's like, it's a brand new part. It's a known good part. Like everything's great. And you go back through and you double, quadruple, triple check everything. Nope.
Breaks
You
your
fish it
spirit.
back on out and you're like, I don't want to do this all over again.
Exactly.
You know, thankfully a starter wouldn't necessarily be too bad unless you're like on your back and doing it your driveway and you drop it on your chest. But
Like a water
Just
pump would
redoing-
water pump would ruin your life. Like to put it back
Oh,
together,
dude,
and
right?
It's not turning, or it just starts pouring.
Yeah.
Which ask
It's
me
just-
how I've been through that job before.
or you look at
One
it,
of those little
keep
rings.
throwing the belt off because the shaft has got like a little wiggle in it and it just like whoop, whoop, throws belts.
Or
Or
that
just sitting there.
crossover pipe on that Galant VR4, the 4G63,
Yeah, 'cause
that
it
gets
came with the
buried
wrong
behind
O-ring.
the turbo.
Yeah.
the wrong O-ring that fit perfectly.
Yeah, well,
Gross.
yeah,
Those
stuff
jobs
like
break
that.
my
When you
heart.
have when it's and you're just like you have to like to go and walk away for like 24 hours. But
That
I
look,
just- I
that
need
look
to-
you just did is the look you're just like disgusted. You're like,
yeah, you're just like I need to walk away for a little bit. Like this is
that's
it's
hard.
so bad.
Yeah, it's hard. It's like
it's-
6 hours later because you have to undo it and then do it again, and you hope.
And you're like, okay, well,
You're
here's your
hoping.
part. Good thing it's under. Good thing we replaced it for you, your part. Good thing it had that 30-day warranty or whatever it is. There's like, I do not give a damn about the part.
My
I
life back,
absolutely
man.
give a damn about me roasting. Especially if you're like, oh yeah, I'll just swap this out. Then I'll go to this other thing later. I'll drive this car to this thing. And it's,
Nope,
yep.
not today.
Nyet. Yeah,
Not today,
I
Satan.
remember specifically I did that. That was on my Barracuda. All right, it was just like I upgraded to a later style starter and gear reduction and the whole thing. To go put it in, and I got like 2 starts out of it. I'm just like, motherfucker.
God, that's.
Then I'm like, well, I changed the start. It's a newer style starter. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I go back to the old school one, but I couldn't get the old school. And they're like, oh, yep, we tested it. Or even you ever pull a part and have the part tested and like, oh, the part's great.
Oh,
It's fine. and then you go put it back in your car and it turns out it's not.
the
I had that
resistor
with
on
an
that blower
alternator.
motor.
Oh yeah, I
The
tested it.
ohms were perfect because you usually do a resistance test, and ohms were exactly what everybody said it should be.
Yeah.
It was still, it can still fail. Like
Yeah.
that's just a basic circuit test, right, to see if it's still functioning. But yeah, they can still.
Yeah.
The operation can still fail.
Like I had my 4Runner, my '87 4Runner, and I was getting it was stalling out. I was getting the charge light issue. I'd have to rev this knot out of it for the charge light to go away. I was like, damn it, my alternator's going out. So get it home, fish the alternator. That's easy on that. Pull the alternator out, take it to the local parts place, and it's a nice, the original nice Denso Nippon Denso.
Yeah, good
alternator.
unit.
Yeah, take it in there, and comes back. It's like, hey man, I'd love to sell you an alternator, but I just tested this thing. This bench test, perfect, putting out everything great. Really? He's like, yeah, this is a nice OEM alternator. You're like, don't, you're probably best off
You're
keeping
messing
this
up,
thing.
bro.
I'm like, all right, yeah, fair point. So I drive home, put it all back in. I check everything else, connections and all this stuff. And no, nothing. Same thing. I'm just like, what the hell? I'm checking voltages. I'm making sure, it's 87 Toyota, and they have some electrical snafus in
little
those
bit.
trucks.
Yeah.
People don't like to talk about Toyotas having any common problems, but the electrical stuff is not great on those. Connections are old. So going through, checking grounds, making sure everything's fine, and I keep coming back to this damn alternator. I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to buy an alternator. So I put it on. Perfectly fine. Perfectly great. So I just uninstalled it, reinstalled it, uninstalled it, put a new one in it after doing all that extra labor. And yeah, that's what it was the whole time. It was that alternator, and they bench tested, and it just, I don't know, but
Time out. They bench tested it. The guy might have went in the back and been
had a
like,
smoke.
Yeah.
And just like,
This is a damn
Boy.
fine alternator, son.
look at this thing. Fuck it.
Why'd you
Come
install
back
it
on
again,
that.
my friend?
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, just your own personal rework is just so.
Well, rework in
disheartening.
general, yeah, your own.
Yeah.
This one's not going to surprise anyone that follows the projects I do.
Steve? Jobs you don't like?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear he was kind of an asshole.
Oh,
I never saw that Aston Kutcher movie.
Sure liked his turtleneck.
That's right. Yeah.
Taking apart
Flushing
dashes. Taking apart dashes.
Oh yeah,
Dude,
yeah, and
so-
then the rattle chasing thereof afterwards.
it's not even. It's
When, like, a little
so
piece of felt fell off somewhere, and then it squeaks for eternity.
I think it more has to do with the temperamental nature of the materials after 30 years, because a lot of the
Brittle
cars are
plastic.
30 years, and I'm used to having to torque on engine parts, suspension parts. When you're doing a dash, it's a completely different mindset. If you go
Right.
in with that mentality, you will ruin your car, and some of these pieces you cannot source anymore. And if you do, it's
looking
like,
at you, E30 instrument
I
cluster.
don't even want to talk about that. But pulling some of these dashes, and the thing is, the dash isn't like it was 30 years ago. Some parts have swollen, some parts have shrank.
Yes.
Some of the clips have obviously deteriorated. So when you
And
start,
are unobtainium.
oh yeah, dude. And then if you do break apart, and you're like, F it, I can still put it back without that clip. That's when you introduce the worst vibration noises you'll ever. Yeah. There's something about doing a dash job, man. Like if I have to replace like a heater core or something and I have to access it from the front or anything else under the dash or I just don't want to even get into it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I hate
agree.
it. I hate touching old plastic stuff.
It's not
brutal.
fun, and
never
it's
fun.
funny. Like some of it, I will say the plastics for the most part in that E30 held up pretty well.
Yeah.
If you've ever worked on an '80s Volvo,
Sure.
the plastic in that is just instantly turns. You like look at it in anger, and it completely explodes and blows
Except
up, and it turns into ash.
Most E30 interiors are all kinds of crap.
Yeah, ours was a good example.
We were lucky, but I still like when we were stretching that cowl to fit the cluster in and
Yeah.
out each time.
Yeah.
Oh, you hear it creaking.
Yeah.
And you just know, like, because it just takes that one little bit of pressure that
Yep.
sends that line
Yep.
right through it, right?
Yeah, unfun.
It's from bad day to horrible day. So for me, taking apart dashes, doing that kind of work, it's just like one of my least favorite things to do. I'd do a timing belt before I have to take a dash apart and put it back together.
Fair.
the way I
Yeah.
work.
You know what also is frustrating? You ever go to a pick and pull for like your one part for that dash that you need, and the car's fresh and it comes in, and you go there to get it, but some other clown needed like the blower motor,
And cracked it to get
and
it
they
out.
literally took a hatchet to everything else in the interior
I
to
hate
get
that.
that.
I
They're like,
hate
oh,
that.
I need this blower motor that's through this dash, and they literally take a machete kills, and they just work their way through the entire instrument cluster and dash and everything, just wreck shop for their like one ubiquitous blower motor that's probably in like 11 different makes and models of the same era, and it's just
Yeah, it's the absolute
honorable
worst.
mention to bullshittery. Like that's
That's a bad move. That's a
just
low.
poor wrecking yard etiquette. It's just it really is. It's like
We got standards to maintain out here, folks.
you get there like, oh, I need this wiring harness for the engine bay on this whatever, because the fuel box, and somebody just went full like butcher job on it and just like tore pigtails off of it just because they needed the attached
to
sensor
pull a fog
And
light
they
or
didn't-
something too. Like
yeah,
they
they
pulled the
didn't-
whole wiring harness out.
Yeah, and they didn't want to like disconnect it from whatever, and so they just tore it out.
Oh, that is the
You're
worst.
just like, blah.
Yeah, I
Damn it,
mean,
people.
this is right up there with dashes.
Oh.
Wiring, especially radios, things like that. I really don't like.
No.
And it's not following factory wiring. It's following Joe
Fuckery.
Bob's backyard,
Yeah.
freaking electrical tape,
It's on its
crimps.
11th like Viper alarm
Oh
from
my
like
God, what a
how-
nightmare, man! To unpack some of those jobs, and those jobs sometimes start off as, yeah, this won't be a problem. This will take me an afternoon.
And you found a bundle of wire nuts and butt connectors, and
You're
just
freaking
like
ripping apart your dash, which I already said I
electrical
don't like
tape
to
and-
do.
Yep.
And pulling out your interior carpet, your center console, seats. For some reason, the seats are out. Your whole garage is covered in shit just to figure out a wiring thing, a small basic wiring thing where someone got out of control. So those kind of jobs, man, it's just like the nitpicky, like especially where someone messed up before. Like figuring out how someone's mind work, it really worries me.
Sure.
When you
Yeah.
see how the wiring is done, you're like, this person's fucking insane.
This person is hammered drunk at all times.
or
while working on
something.
this.
Like,
Yeah.
who thought this looked good, and then they jam it all and put like a plastic cover over it.
Exactly. Like, oh, clearly prison quality crystal meth was involved in the wiring of this.
Not fun
radio.
job. I've never had fun doing one of those jobs, and it like turns into a day or 2 days of diagnostic wire chasing and unfucking, I guess.
Yeah, or like when you, and then you think you've got it, and you're like, all right, I kind of undid it, and I had to splice some wires and bust out a soldering gun and get it all back together. And
The right way.
you're like, hey, you know what? It's finally cleaned up and it's good. And then you drive and you hit your first real speed bump, and it's black. And you're just like,
I was gonna say you turn
you're
on.
just smacking your dash until it comes back, and you're like, so help me God.
Dude, I was gonna say you turn on the accessories, and like now your interior lights don't work, but your radio works.
Yeah, your mirrors fold in. You're like, what just happened? Yeah,
Yeah, close enough.
windshield wipers.
That's
yeah.
when you crush a beer and say close enough, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's how we got here, because that's what the last 11 people that worked on it did. And
Right.
They all butchered it slightly different, and then it turns into this ever. You know what? I'm gonna go on a quick tangent.
Sure.
This is something I've come to learn more and more.
the old adage of just buy the nicest one that you can, and don't buy one that just needs a little bit of this and that, and has some mods that you can undo, but you save 10%. Don't do that. Buy the nicest car you can, because the amount of that kind of nonsense and bullshit that you run into.
Yeah. Unless you're really good at finding it and like figuring out that it's within your wheelhouse that you can take care of.
It's like there's maybe there's old body work and maybe there's this and there's that and there's this unknown, and even the perfect car is not going to be perfect. There's always something, but just inheriting that nonsense that you're just talking about.
Boy.
I mean, that's usually, I mean, that is the end of the swimming pool that I play in. Is traditionally
same here.
The nonsense bullshittery.
Right.
And so
because it's the margin of getting a good deal. Usually you gotta bring into account some of that dumb fuckery.
fact.
Yeah.
Yes. Dumb.
You mean like
fuckery.
the Mustang I'm working on? But yeah.
You know what's one that's kind of unfun?
What's that?
Smog stuff. California smog stuff. Some of it can be a little interesting, but for the most part, it's like, oh, this car, it just needs to set the catalytic converter monitor, but it refuses to, and I've driven it 1,180 miles, and it just won't do it. And it turns out that, like, have you ever had any like real knockdown, drag out fights with smog?
Well, I did have an issue. My NSX wouldn't pass smog.
Interesting. Okay.
So, especially Hondas from this time, EGRs.
That was a 92?
93.
93.
So yeah, EGRs were a big issue. Early EGRs sucked. To keep them operating, they had to remain carbon free, but they always caked up with carbon. The NSX,
especially because a lot of those were like in that era. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not convinced that the JDM cars ran EGRs. Period.
I think it was only us.
Right. So you took a performance car that was from Japan, and that's how in its home market, and that's where it was designed. And then you have to modify and do some stuff to for EGR stuff out here.
Mm-hmm. And you're talking about exhaust gas, which is inherently horrible quality.
Yes.
It's going to be sooty, full of carbon, and you're going to try to put that back in your engine.
Yeah, and so, you know, like the Celica Supras were pretty good for that. I had an 83 Supra that I could never get past the California smog because the EGR system was boned, because it lived up in Oregon, and it's got an EGR passage that passes through the intake manifold, and it was completely rusted and coked up because the guy lived on the coast, and so it was a bomb. It was done. It was just a non-starter. So I ended up selling the car for relatively cheap to a guy who ended up taking it out of state.
Yeah, so my NSX, it kept coming back, and it was clearly the EGR. So not only just replacing the EGR, I tried to clean the EGR, which I always try to do with old cars. That is like a 25% chance to save an EGR. When they're so the vacuum will still work, but it will have enough carbon in there so it doesn't fully function enough, and it won't bring your numbers up to where they need to be. These cars barely pass smog new.
Sure.
Right? So the EGR...
Was it a function of the EGR valve itself, or the solenoid that was actuating it, or was it literally the passage was all coked up?
So two things. The EGR valve itself was beyond, it was 120-something thousand miles.
Yes.
It was not functioning fully. On top of that, like that little, so the one on the NSX is a metal tube, a small metal tube, like super narrow diameter that runs pretty long. I can't remember off the top of my head, maybe like a foot long. The damn thing, like you couldn't even you had to get a pick tool to knock the soot out of it. It was like there was almost no air moving.
Right.
So clearly that was the issue. That even the EGR didn't have enough air to actuate it to make it move.
Yeah.
So that tube just gets caked up, and it's something you have to do. And if you don't do it soon enough, it ruins the EGR.
Do some of those? I know some of those of that, like the '90s and early 2000s era EGR. Like I was messing on it was like a '99 Altima. Or something, and it wasn't setting the EGR readiness monitor, so it's OBD2 car, and it actually had an EGR temp sensor on the EGR that would then tell the ECU how much to fire the solenoid to open the EGR based on temp, EGR temp sensor, and so you can also then have a situation where just the face of that sensor gets coked up a little bit.
Sure.
And you got to clean all that out.
Yeah, no signal going to anything, right?
Yeah, or incorrect signal. It thinks it's like 1/5 the temp that it should be.
This tube, I mean, it was hilarious. So I disconnected through rubber soft hoses and was jamming like this really long metal rod through, and it was soot, like just pouring out.
Yeah.
It was like a comical scene, but it's just like, you're right. These cars didn't come with this. We're just
Yeah.
adding something on that taxes the system already. A car that barely passed smog, just to bleed it by. If that thing's not functioning at 100%, boom, right?
Did I ever tell you the ballad of the PT Cruiser and like Chrysler product from the late 90s, early 2000s, and
Oh, boy.
the O2 heated O2 sensor monitors?
Oh man, what happened?
So I was helping out my guys at Car Donation. Their mechanic was out sick for a while, and I decided I was going to play mechanic. And so they kept getting this glut of like, you know, early 2000s PT Cruisers and some of the serious like the cloud cars, and they specifically the PT Cruisers. They kept never setting the heated O2 sensor monitor. For no damn reason. Everything else will be fine. Everything checks out. You put brand new O2 sensors in it. Will not set that monitor.
Interesting.
Apparently, I found this deep dive into the bowels of the internet on a PT Cruiser forum where they had an actual
Good timeout. Timeout.
No,
I
no
want to
timeout.
meet. I want to
PT
meet
Cruiser
everyone
forum.
on that forum. I want to have a barbecue.
Well, let me
just
tell
hang
you.
out.
Let me tell you. A member of the forum happened to be an ex-Chrysler engineer who specifically had memories of how they managed to set up everything for the smog readiness monitors on those cars, and specifically that unless the vehicle saw full throttle, which is counterintuitive to every drive cycle
Sure.
ever for
Never
setting
ever
smog.
go full throttle.
Literally, it usually cancels the drive cycle.
Never go full throttle.
You never.
I don't want to say.
Yeah, never. Exactly. So you have to at least it has to see full throttle.
That doesn't make
And
any
then you
sense.
have to cruise at like 55 miles an hour for umpteen seconds, always at least 1% or more on the throttle. But you can't exceed like 60 miles an hour. And then once you do that, you then have to pull it over, shut the car off immediately, because every second that you're not on the throttle is uncounting your countdown that counted you up to that point. So if you have to drive for say 350 seconds
Yeah.
and you get to 360 seconds, but if it then takes you 15 seconds to coast to a stop, pull off to the side of the road, and shut it down, you're now 5 seconds under that threshold of 350 seconds.
horrible.
And it will not set that monitor. So you have to do full throttle, then cruise for umpteen seconds, pull it over, immediately shut it off, like as quick as you can. Come to a stop, shut it off, wait at least 5 full minutes, fire it up, bang, sets the monitor. And I
Drive
was like,
cycles.
what? That is stupid. And every drive cycle you would read for that car, it wasn't there. The only reason that I was able to figure this out is some random ex-Chrysler engineer said that, hey, this was I don't know why, it was some weird step that they used to limp this thing through smog, and they baked that into it. And I found this guy commenting on a PT Cruiser forum, and that's the only reason I was getting. And sure enough, every single time, it would, hey, they were not setting it. I was like, let me do my magic trick. So I had made this little drive loop that I would do. Bang, every time, set it.
It's
Bang,
awesome. You're the man.
So PT Cruisers, Chrysler, Town and Countries, your Dodge Intrepids, all of that stuff from like the late 80s to like, let's call it 2004, 2005, every single time. That would do it.
You know,
just like clockwork.
This totally makes sense as to why you have a PT Cruiser tramp stamp now. Now I get it. Now I get it, guys.
Hey, at least it's got the faux wood paneling.
It does.
It's got the Buddha.
It's a little hairier than I remember.
No Woody jokes, please.
I pictured this guy behind the parts store, like in a trench coat and for some reason a Zorro mask, whispering to you, "Hey, buddy,
Hey, man,
you want to pass some readiness checks?
you ready? Can I heat your O2? Please stop talking to me, sir.
Good Lord.
But yeah, the smog stuff is just kind
Smog
of
sucks. Yeah,
it's
agreed.
goofy. And then I've had other opportunities where like it'll set all these monitors except for say secondary air. So you think there's something wrong with the secondary air system, but the secondary air system's actually okay.
Yeah.
It's actually the O2 sensor.
I grew up on the East Coast in the Northeast, so I'll tell you, nothing sucks more than suspension on a rusty car because high torque values, right? All your suspension bolts are torqued way down.
Well, maybe herpes sucks worse.
Does it?
I don't know. Well, I mean, that's how
bad do
you
you
get
need to
it.
get your car running
That's how you
again?
get it.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Well, true.
Yeah.
But you,
and exhaust, rusty exhaust stuff. Is
like exhaust manifold stuns.
bolts.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, something about rust on suspension components, and every bolt's going to shear off. It basically fuses. It just looks like a cluster of rust.
When to become one.
No, it sucks. No matter how much heat, PBR,
PBR. Well, PBR and PB Blaster. Yeah.
PB Blaster. No matter what you throw at it, that is one of my worst jobs. I remember I've seen like helping a friend with suspension, and they're like, "Oh, it's originally from Pennselsvania." I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to do it. Don't want to do it, buddy."
Nope.
And then they send me a picture, and they're like, "It looks pretty good." I'm like, "Do you see the orange brownish parts? That's not where. Those are the bolts. that we have to remove."
That's not a rivet. That's an actual. That's
bolt.
not a rusty rivet. That is the remains of a bolt and a nut that have fused into one unholy union.
For some reason, rusted suspension bolts are stronger than most welds I've ever seen in my life. Like, I'm not even joking. The integrity of those things it's just incredible. But yep, put it on my I don't even touch jobs list.
Yeah.
I hate doing it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, we're done complaining. I thought we named some pretty fun stuff. Oh, you got another one?
No, I'm just probably going to
complain. Yeah.
One of us is going to complain about the incoming quiz.
Yes.
In which Frank, will be quizzing one Chadwick next to me.
Let me walk you guys through the rules, huh?
Oh, yeah, you want to do that while I cue this thing up?
Get your little quizzy ready.
All right.
So we do read automotive print ad quizzes we find on the interwebs, but they're print ads that originally ran in magazines. You can look that one up, Google that. But 80s, 90s, early 2000s are fair game. We try not to give away what car we're talking about. If it's anything obvious in the ad, we omit that information. But the other person, which will be me in this case, I have 3 guesses to arrive at the vehicle Frank is quizzing me on. I can ask for hints when I fail. Frank's been stumping me pretty hard lately, so I'm not expecting anything less.
We'll see. This is an interesting one. And it says at the very top, "Your time has come." And then it has, that's spelled with an O. Oh. And it has almost front on. It's at a little bit like maybe a 15-degree angle.
Okay.
Of the front of the car. It's clad in red.
Okay.
And then it says the name, which I'm not going to say.
Yes, please don't. Well,
the excitement began 15 years ago when those electrifying birds came down like rolling thunder to capture the hearts of enthusiasts everywhere. And a legend was born. Now comes the road machine that will fire up a new generation. From saber-like nose to rakish tail, Blank is a brilliant orchestration of aerodynamic function. Its .31 drag coefficient is the best of any production car Blank has ever tested. But the new Blank is much more than a beautiful piece of automotive sculpture. It's a driver's car that's totally engineered for serious road work. Blank, with options, shown $10,076. Blank's base price, only $9,659. This is a manufacturer's retail price, including dealer prep, taxes, license, destination charges, and optional equipment additional. The, quote, hands-on impression will convince you that Blank is a driving sensation. The legend makers at Blank have done it again. Now, there is a little box in the middle. The
with
box,
some specs,
it's got a profile of the vehicle.
Okay.
And it says, the driver's car. Then it says, the making of a legend. And it has bullet points with some specs for you, my friend.
I was going to say, thank God.
5.0 liter 4-barrel V8 with dual free flow resonator exhaust.
Okay.
4-speed manual transmission.
Time period.
Quick ratio power steering. McPherson front struts. Front and rear stabilizer bars.
Okay.
Torque arm rear suspension. Turbo cast aluminum wheels. 205/70/14 steel radials. 14.5-inch steering wheel.
Oh, good to know.
Reclining front bucket seats.
Okay.
Are you ready? Are you ready to come at me with a guess,
bro?
my friend?
Can you? There was a section about a bird at the beginning. Did you say lightning?
I will read the first paragraph.
This sounds like something out of Thor.
The excitement began 15 years ago when those electrifying birds came down like rolling thunder to capture the hearts of enthusiasts everywhere, and a legend was born.
Okay, so lightning birds kind of made me think one thing.
Fried chicken?
Made me think two things. So, 5-liter V8 sounds a little Fordish to me.
5-liter 4-barrel.
Boy, this is where it's going to get tricky because they stuck a 5-liter in a lot of things.
I suppose.
I'm going to go with Lightning Bird though. I'm going to say Ford Thunderbird, my friend.
Excellent deduction. However, it is not the Ford Thunderbird.
I guess my one request for further information would be,
Okay.
Did I nail the make?
It is not a Ford branded product.
Okay. A legend was born,
Mm-hmm.
but it said from 15 years ago too, so that nameplate existed. So the 5-liter V8 got put in a lot of stuff, clearly.
Sure.
We talked about Mercury Capris before. I don't think you're coming at me like that. Although it did have a history, but nothing. The Mercury Capri we talked about changed too. Every generation was a completely different vehicle. I'm also thinking of the Mercury Cougar, but I don't know if I think they stuck a 5-liter in that.
I believe they did. Remember I did the XR7
Which
a
was
long
the
time ago
turbo
with the
2.3.
With the extra shocks, if you remember correctly.
In the trunk in a box.
Exactly.
I don't think you're doing Mercury Cougar. Well, you could be. You really could be. What else could they stick that 5-liter in?
Would it have an aerodynamic drag coefficient of 0.31?
I mean, the Cougar.
The best of any production car that Blank has ever tested?
Okay, second guess. Let's not burn too much time. Mercury Cougar. I'm going to go with it.
It is not the Mercury Cougar.
I'm going to need a huge help.
It is not a Ford Motor Product company thing at all. So no Lincoln, no Mercure.
Okay. 5-liter V8 for
Ford.
only 97. We're definitely talking about a domestic. I'm feeling GM
Dearborn.
because GM ran some 5-liters.
Perhaps they did.
They ran 5.7s for the longest time, right? Like the lot.
5.7 is the 350.
Yeah, for a long time.
Of their 5.0 was also known as a 305 or a
Correct.
307, depending on year.
Well-
and they did a 301, but they never called that. They called that the 4.9.
But I'm in the right bracket. These cars competed, right? So if we are talking about a GM car, we are talking about the competition to the Mustang, Cougar, blah,
Sure.
blah, blah. In which case we're looking at, I want to say, it's going to be the twins, the Camaro or the Firebird. So I still have like a 50-50 on this one. Lightning Bird sounds like Firebird. I'm going to go with our friends at Pontiac. And I'm going
Okay.
to go with a Pontiac Firebird with that delicious 5-liter
4-barrel.
power plant. Yeah.
Now the excitement really begins. 1982 Trans Am. So I will give that to you with Firebird because it's effectively the same car.
Yes.
And that is the birds part. Why they went electrifying birds and
That
not
part
like
was
flaming
confusing.
birds or something?
Tell me Thunderbird wasn't a logical
That was
conclusion.
I thought it was you would go at least Thunderbird first because that is the most. But I don't know. I don't think you can get those Thunderbirds. Can you get those 5-liter Thunderbirds with a manual back in the day?
I think
This is a
I think-
1982
I
Trans
think
Am.
everything came with a manual then.
So our last episode, our friend David, he was saying he had a 1982 train. He had this car.
that's awesome.
He had this
Hey,
car, but I think
we should
he
send him
said
the
he
ad.
was- we should check that out. Oh, your time has come.
It does look good.
It does look pretty good. It does. It looks so early 80s retro futuristic.
So
just that front
awesome.
shot.
Yep.
But yeah, 4-speed. I want.
me
It's
look.
funny that it was a 4-speed. I don't know when they went to a 5-speed. But yeah, I don't know if you can get the 50 V8 Thunderbirds with a manual. That might have been. I know
kinda
you
feel
could.
like it
I know
is.
you could. I think on like the 2-3-liter turbo coupes and the 6-cylinders. I
The
don't know.
XR7 you could.
You could on an XR7.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sure then you could on a Thunderbird. But it was a 5-speed. I don't think it was a 4-speed. I think it was the T5, and the T5 went into this later too. T5 was in everything.
We're talking about 90.
This is 82. 1982. But yes, good job, ultimately,
Thanks, man.
my friend. You pieced that together. The birds thing, yeah. I think that, yeah, the trick was like, it was, in my head, I was like, the 5-liter V8, like, but then you sit and think like, oh, dude, there's so many cars that came in that era that came with a 5.0 V8. I mean, shoot, you even had like Jeeps and stuff, the 304.
Yeah, we'd have to. I want to kind of dive into this. I kind of feel like you could have back then.
You very well could have.
Who knows?
But that was such like the personal luxury.
Sorry, I heard lightning birds and immediately jumped.
Lightning birds. No, and you should have. You should have. It's like it was almost yeah.
That was a good time. These old pony cars were all spec'd so close. Like it was just like everybody. Oh, we got a new.
Although I guess you know what? I guess if you really sat down and would like deep dive, like the Thunderbird had existed for far before 15 years.
Yeah, that was
1982.
That's very true.
In any time in the 80s, because of 50 was it 52? Was the first year of the Thunderbird? I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm not a Thunderbird aficionado.
Yeah, no, neither. Cool, man.
But yes, well done.
Thanks, man.
Sir.
That was a good one. That was a good one. Pretty tricky. When you didn't get to those specs, I was like, I'm dead.
Yeah. No, that would have been unfair.
Game over. Okay.
Should we celebrate with some PCP, my friend?
Yes, sir.
Want me to shoot?
Did I lead the dance last time, or did you?
I don't know. I'll just go. I don't have a whole lot to offer.
Go, yeah.
This time, anyways. So short and sweet. I stuffed the Galant into the garage, and I was going to. I've been so damn busy, but I at least said like, I noticed on the top of the valve cover, because the battery was starting to get a little long in the tooth. So I put it on a trickle charger and on a tender. With the hood up, and I walked back in there and I looked, and I noticed on the top of the valve cover there was oil like around on the top of the valve cover, like it had been pushed past the filler, the gasket on the filler. I was like, well, that leads me thinking back to our PCV situation.
Yep, that's exactly what.
But I know that's a brand new OEM PCV valve you put in like less than 60 miles ago, like not that long ago. So I said, okay, well, let me pull the PCV valve. Blow into it, suck on it, do the whole thing.
I bet you did.
I did. And not only did it enjoy it, it worked. It worked as intended.
I tested. I sucked and blowed it too as well.
Oh, good. I'm glad we're sharing
it's an OEM part.
gametes. But it's an OEM part, and it was good. And like,
Eskimo Brothers.
Exactly. And so that was okay. So I need to find time to just really roll my sleeves up and get into it. But it's like,
how's the
that
seal
led me more to
how's the
thinking.
seal on the oil fill cap?
It seems
I don't think I swapped that
okay.
one out.
It's probably still kind of old. I'll probably just get a new little
just in case.
gasket.
Those when they fail, they do that anyway.
Yeah.
On those cars, yeah.
Yeah, but again, that car hasn't seen a whole lot of miles, and that valve cover's new, so like I wouldn't expect there to be oil, but it was a lot of oil, like that big. Like I pulled the plastic cover in the valley.
Yeah.
To make sure there was nothing got in there. Nothing did, but it was like right up to that.
Interesting.
About the size of like a dollar bill. And I'm like, okay. So it still leads me to believe that maybe there's still too much pressure in the crankcase, even though
did you pull your plugs to see if it's wet in there? Because if it's dry in there, it's coming through the fill cap.
What do you mean?
It's not pushing by the spark plugs.
No, but the whole rest of the valley in there was okay. Was dry, so it wasn't coming. It wasn't being pushed past the plugs. Like
okay, good.
Like it has like zero compression, and it's like blasting oil through the oil rings.
I've seen a lot of fun things.
Yeah, so all that whole when you pull the plastic cover off, all of that stuff was dry.
Okay.
It was only just on the top where like the lettering is.
Oh.
On the top there.
So probably I bet that seal on the fill cap.
It could be.
Don't go chasing waterfalls. This could be a separate little.
Yeah, but I saw that and I'm just like, because that's kind of like the number one way is you can blow past. Let's pretend for a moment and just entertain me here that the turbo's actually okay because it was rebuilt, granted 100 miles ago, but like 15 years ago. If that oil seal's fine, like the way you push that oil past into that system is that the PCV system's boned, and it was boned until you unboned it.
Yeah, it was completely off the shelf.
But that's how you anger your turbo rebuilder. Is you get your rebuilt turbo and you put it on, and then it turns out the other one was maybe not that bad. But you got to rebuild, and now you put it in. You're like, it's still broken. You screwed it up, and you mail it back to them like, bro, it's fine. Your PCV system's boned.
Well, the old one was definitely toast.
Yeah, the old one was toast anyways. Yeah, so it was super, super toast. But the PCV system was also toast too.
Correct.
Because it had incorrect parts in it from a dollar drive-through oil change
The wastegate flapper was completely cracked open.
Yeah, and the manifold was gone, and the whole the turbine was cooked. Yeah, so that's not what we have here. But it was just like, oh boy, maybe there's still more pressure in the system. I don't know. I still need to troubleshoot it more. I think step one is I'm going to get underneath it and get to the return. Yeah, I'm gonna pull the turbo, but I'm before I yank that and pull the radiator and all that. I just want to get to the line at the oil pan, disconnect that. And if I have oil coming out, then I'm okay. Like I know, like if it's somehow blocked up for God knows why, who knows? It shouldn't be. But
And those
let's
are
say
all new
whatever.
gaskets.
That's
too.
what I mean. Like there's no reason for it to be.
gaskets
But if
on every
something in it got squirrely and I cleaned it out, and then I just have to pull piping and clean all the oil residue out of it and put it back and dry it
Sure.
and see what I get. But so I did a little bit of that, and then just one quick thing. Just now, effectively, just put a new latch on the S2000.
Yeah, you
top.
did.
So now we have a working convertible top. I just a little bit of PDR work and then drive the bejesus out of it.
Hell yeah.
That's
Awesome.
the plan, man. How about you?
Well, I in the vein of selling cars, I bought another car.
Hey, the main vein.
The
Yes.
main vein, you know how we work. So I wasn't in the market for it, but I'm always looking. So I picked up a
Watching.
97 Miata.
Okay.
That was one owner, all original. This is not completely original. I will go over that, but it had some aftermarket wheels and a roll bar. Other than
Okay.
that, bone stock. It's so incredibly hard to find a bone stock. I mean, original paint on most of the car too,
Cool.
which is insane. So what I did to this vehicle is I took it in. I wanted the roll bar. It's a hard dog roll bar, which is one of the ones you use for spec Miata racing.
Cool.
So I pulled that. That's like $750 value, and I took the Team Racing Dynamic Motorsport wheels, which are like
Okay.
spec Miata wheels.
Sure.
Those are quite a bit of money, so I took those off. I sourced new Miata wheels for
Okay.
it, the OEM ones, painted
Sure.
them because they were black. Someone made them black.
Yeah.
I put them back on the car, took the roll bar off, which is not a fun job. That
You gotta
thing's-
pull the seats and stuff to do it, or
even more than that, you have to get underneath. It's all the bolts
Sure.
go through, so you
Yeah.
have to get behind everything underneath the car. Got that off. I did an oil change, plug wires. Did a review, which would be out shortly on my
There you
channel.
go.
And
Tune
I'm,
in.
I'm selling it to my brother on the East Coast because all the Miatas you find out there are just completely rotted, completely rotted.
Yep.
So and this is an unmodified one.
Cool.
So you're literally getting a stock, one owner, old lady in Carmel, which is like
Brilliant.
pampered its life. With no mods and no rust. I mean,
Sweet.
the bolts are shiny underneath.
Love it.
It's ridiculous. So I'm hooking him up. I could flip it and make quite a bit of money, actually, because stock Miatas are like one of the rarest cars you've ever seen.
Original color last year.
Interior's in good
Yeah.
shape, leather.
Cool.
Everything's original. So yeah, it's getting shipped out tomorrow.
Cool.
He's gonna enjoy it. So enjoy this if you're listening.
There you go.
Uh,
Broheim.
Yeah, hooking him up. So
Bitchin'.
his mechanic that's going to do the work for him is going to be shocked when he sees that car.
Sure,
After
yeah,
working on
they're
nothing
just-
but East Coast Miatas.
Yeah.
It's a Miata specialty shop, so all they see is
Cool.
mid-Atlantic rusted out Miatas.
Yeah.
It's going to pull this thing in and be like, "What? I need to buy this off you."
Sweet. There you go.
So yeah, that's my PCP. I
Kick
love
ass.
Miatas, man. I freaking
I
love
know.
it. It's my fourth
It's
one.
You're becoming it's becoming a problem. I'm
Is
concerned.
it? It's always been.
Is the Miata for you the Celica Supra for me? Like what do we?
I think it is. I don't know, man. There's I have a lot of Celica Supras.
Yeah,
like
well,
basically.
That's a fair point. Also, a fair point is saying a thank you to everyone for
Yeah, guys.
doing this and tuning in and continuing to put up with our nonsense. No guest this week. I would like to say we will have the guest thing went well. I think.
Yeah, it was
from
good.
last week,
We'll do
and
it
so
again.
I think we should do that again shortly. If you know someone that should be a guest and you can con them into reaching out to us to be a guest, we can do that. Otherwise, tune in again. Chadwick, where can people find your nonsense?
Yeah, Auto Obsessive Garage. You can find my many reviews and wrenching
Yes.
projects.
That's on the YouTubes and the Instagram.
YouTube, Instagram. You'll
I'm
find
doing-
me anywhere.
I'm in the same spots as the Photographer's Garage, and together we are at APA Podcast, another pointless
Automotive
podcast
on Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to your favorite
and the club.
podcasts.
We can also be found in the club. So
It's always
with
going
that,
down.
It's where you can find me in the club, and we can hopefully find you here again next week. Thank you.
Thanks again, guys. Take care,
Namaste.
please.